Behind me, a group of people have made an incredible breakthrough in the search for a new form of transport. It might look like the mythical Blue Room at Edwards Air Force Base, where ufologists believe alien spacecraft are kept, but it is in fact the manufacturing center of Flarecraft Incorporated. Why Flarecraft? Here's a clue.
Flare is when the vehicle is close to the ground, within about half a wingspan from the ground, there's a buildup of pressure under the wing. Any wing of any airplane experiences ground effect, and you can feel the cushion of air building up underneath your wing. Whereas that's a very transient experience in an airplane or an airline or any airplane. This craft operates its entire life in the flare.
When any plane lands, there is a moment when the air circulating around the wing cannot complete the circle as the ground is in the way. The leading edge of the wing forces air to the ground, providing a cushion of air. With some design modifications to increase stability, ground effect craft can operate at very low altitude with great efficiency.
From a pilot's standpoint, it's different because you're always operating so close to the water. You're never more than 6-8 feet off the surface of the water, and you have such a great speed at that low altitude. My first flight in the craft, I was a little apprehensive about making turns because I was afraid of what would happen if I inadvertently put one of the pontoons in the water. Well, then I learned that it doesn't bother it at all. It just pops right back out. You literally have to force the craft into the water, and then it just pops out just like skipping a rock across the water.
That's when it's not acting like a boat, which it can also be compared to, particularly during takeoff and landing. In fact, its dual power sources, aircraft turboprop and jet ski turbine, as well as its half-boat, half-plane fuselage, reflect the Flarecraft's ambiguous nature. But despite its mixed-up genes, the Flarecraft does have some very positive virtues in flying so near to the ground.
It is a very efficient product for transporting people over the water. It's very smooth in operation. It doesn't have the pounding that a speedboat has because it leaves the water and operates as an aircraft very close to the water, within about 8 feet of the surface of the water.
Already a common sight for the fishermen of Lake Michigan, where it can regularly be seen buzzing the waves at 80 miles per hour, the Flarecraft Corporation envisaged their creation entering service as a water taxi and have already taken several orders. However, they're not the first people on the planet to exploit ground effect. While size isn't everything, there is something slightly more impressive about this. It's called an ekranoplan, then it could hardly be called a Flarecraft coming from Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. They probably didn't have flares. Like all top-secret military developments in the former USSR, it didn't stay secret for long.
It had been apparent to a very few in the intelligence community, obviously, but with the fall of the Soviet Union, became more publicly known. Ekranoplan development, wingship development, which is what we're on about here, began certainly right at 1960 with the development by Alexeyev in Nizhny Novgorod, when he got the go-ahead from Khrushchev to take his ideas of hydrofoils and make them fly. So you have a whole thinking coming from Nizhny that is trying to teach a boat to fly. And that truly was the evolution of the ekranoplan from the Alexeyev Bureau, leading all the way up to the so-called Caspian Sea monster, which was 550 tons, 300 feet long, and flew at 300 to 400 miles an hour.
The awesome size of the 747 scaled Caspian Sea monster opened the West's eyes to the possibilities of ground effect as a new form of global transport that could herald a return to rapid sea travel after half a century of air supremacy.
One of the potential attractions of this wing and ground effect is the fact that a very large aircraft, as Boeing, as Airbus is talking about, would require dramatic changes in airport facilities today. The larger you get, the more weight you have on a landing gear, the larger the wingspan is, requires changes to runways, to taxiways, to the airport gates, to the jetways connecting. The proponents of wing and ground effect vehicles say, if we go back to the sea, we don't have to worry about investing in new runways or changing the configuration of airports.
If you can build to sizes of 5,000 tons or greater, you now clearly cannot be landing on land in airports. You're necessarily having to return to the sea. And so you see in a strange sort of way the return of the great ocean liners of the 20s and the 30s, where they came to their peak in the 1950s with the QE2. And the idea now, you return to the sea, except instead of going 40 knots across the ocean, you're going 400 knots across the ocean and carrying comparable payloads.
In fact, it's been taken so seriously that the Department of Defense is due to present the findings of its 2-year-long inquiry into ground effect craft to the US Senate.
The military, through this ARPA, Advanced Projects Research Agency, wanted to take a better look at it. They put together a team of both Navy and other military service experts on aircraft and on ships, and brought together some of the more free thinkers from the U.S. aerospace industry. They went over, they visited the Russians, they looked at the production capabilities, they looked at the kind of experience they've had. The verdict is not yet in because they're still making their study.
The jury may still be out, but Stephen Hooker is convinced of the viability of ekranoplan and is currently working on projections for mega ground effect craft on a scale even the Russians have never attempted.
The natural course for this technology is to go to large scale, 5,000, 7,000, 8,000 ton wing ships. The same transport can carry not only cargo of the 1,000 ton, 2,000 ton variety, but it can carry also on the order of 1,000 to 2,000 passengers at fares that will become now more reminiscent of bus fares that you have on land, but this is now trans-global bus fare.
Hang on a minute there, Stephen. Despite 30 years of intense military-funded development, the Russians are still not beyond prototype ground effect craft. Can we really expect to see a trans-global budget flare service?
There are too many questions to say it's worth the investment of several billions of dollars. We might see some smaller ones for more recreational or sport uses, but these gigantic, what I call flying aluminum clouds, I don't think are realistic.
Which leaves the Flarecraft free to rule the waves, or rather the space just above them.